Hey everyone, it's ENDYMION, and you already know we gotta talk Dragon Age Veilguard in this video. The reviews are officially out, and things are all over the place, from the usual industry shills claiming the game is amazing, to more independent reviewers stating that this is the biggest disappointment of the year. It's gonna be hard to talk about everything here, mostly because BioWare is going out of their way to DMCA anyone who shares clips of the game outside of official context, which is a terribly gross oversight on their part, but I will share some in-game screenshots at least. But it's very clear that BioWare is absolutely trying to control the narrative surrounding this game into steering the conversation and its Metacritic score into a more positive light to garner more sales in the long run. But what if I told you there's a financial reasoning for all of that? As we also know that EA executives get more money if Metacritic scores are higher. Well, funny how that works. But anyway, let's get into all of this. As of the making of this video, Veilguard is sitting at an 84 on Metacritic, 1 point lower than Inquisition and 2 points lower than Origins. Overall, it's the third worst reviewed game in the series officially, with only Dragon Age 2 having the lowest at 79. Of course, places like IGN gave the game a 9 out of 10. Claiming the game is a triumph and definitely a Game of the Year contender for them. I already theorized this well over a month ago when the previews went out that Veilguard would be easily positioned to win Game of the Year across the board. I also wagered that it will also win at the Game Awards too, but for one simple reason, because it has all the right politics and current day isms in it to ensure that it passes the litmus test for these modern games journalists in order to praise it. Remember that the Game Awards as well as various publications are obviously ran by industry people alone. And in the Game Awards case anyways, we as the players have no direct power over which game wins what during that show at all. So if they wanted to, they could give Best Multiplayer Game to Concord, and realistically, we would have no say in that either. The point is that I would like to tell you to never actually listen to what these publications tell you are the best games of the year or anything like that. Especially these days when it comes to video games, there is an obvious liberal ideological slant when it comes to all of these things. In terms of IGN's review, it's a textbook example of the kind of audience BioWare is trying to foster here as shields against criticism. The reviewer of the IGN piece is Liana Hafer, I hope I'm saying that right, I don't know. A reviewer who goes by she, they, and openly promotes and supports concepts like transgenderism as if the colors here didn't give that away. Look, I'm not attacking this person for being trans, I am simply just seeing patterns and then showing you the evidence is all. That this Liana Hafer individual clearly enjoyed Veilguard because the game openly embraces what they clearly deem important when it comes to representation in gaming. So when I saw the 9 review score, yeah, it was very unsurprising all things considered. However, once you pull away from the ideology and see reviews from people who do not cater to or are a part of those groups specifically, well, the conversation and the scores for this game then changed dramatically. Weirdly enough though, even places like The Guardian, who usually defends this kind of rhetoric, couldn't shake the fact that they too didn't enjoy this game as much as they hoped they would, calling the game inconsistent and having bad writing and dull combat. Then there's Eurogamer, for example, that went really all out and claimed that Veilguard was the best game in the series and gave it a perfect 5 out of 5 score. But that's unsurprising given the fact that this reviewer goes out of their way to write articles about Pride Month stuff. So again, like I'm saying, I'm not attacking these people, I'm just noticing the patterns. That anyone who seems to be even remotely connected in some way to a certain way of thinking or living is also unanimously giving the game glowing scores. However, like I was saying, on the flip side, it's the opposite. For example, we have of all people Skillup's review. And I mean, he's usually a pretty safe bet when it comes to reviewers, and I won't show you any clips of his review in this, because when this video has gone live, I will have already reacted to his entire review and others, so we'll just do that there instead. But anyways, his review is over 40 minutes long, so I don't want this video to be that long. But anyway, he rips that game to shreds, saying that the game feels like a terrible, wasted opportunity that makes zero sense how BioWare was able to create something this bad given the amount of freedom and time that they had at their disposal. Reminder that this is the first new game in the series in 10 years. God, I'm old. And the best BioWare could come up with, according to Skillup, is a laughably bad and shallow action RPG that doesn't cater to neither new or returning fans in any meaningful way. According to his review, Veilguard's story and characters are just downright awful, and he says that around the 10-hour mark of his almost 50 hours journey that he spent, he could already feel the strain setting in. But by hour 20, and especially 30, Skillup was ready to just stop playing because of how poor of an experience it was overall. He says during one segment that he and other reviewers he knows turned the difficulty of the game down to its easiest setting, but not because the game was too hard. They actually turned it down simply because the enemies had far too much health and were very damage spongy, like an MMO boss sort of, and that the combat was not nearly engaging enough to want to suffer through minutes upon minutes of just wailing on these monsters over and over again, just waiting for them to die. So it's never a good sign when a reviewer says they want what is one of the core elements of your game, which is your combat, to end faster because you failed to make the combat more interesting to engage with. This is one of the biggest red flags in terms of its actual gameplay that I have seen. And it astounds me because, again, BioWare made a perfectly serviceable action RPG in Inquisition 10 years ago. So how do you go from that to this slop and somehow make it even worse? According to Skillup, the reason being is simply that the entire game feels like that it's been dumbed down on purpose, and removed of any harsh edges, if you will, to ensure that nobody gets offended or uncomfortable at any point while playing it. By the way, this was leaked by a playtester who played and completed the game over a year ago who spoke to Nure, another YouTuber, about this on her channel. I talked about that playtester's leaks in a video from last week, but they claimed that the game's story and dialogue also had no rough edges to be found. And it's damning that that claim is now being echoed by people like Skillup too, so it seems that what this playtester played was actually real. Especially considering that this playtester also said that Tosh, the Kunari companion in this game, has a part of her side quest where she demands to be referred to as non-binary. Of course, nobody could confirm that about a week ago. Surely that was a lie, right? There's no way they were implementing current day into the lands of Theseus. Unfortunately, it is actually true. I can't show you video clips of this because BioWare and EA will just try to copyright strike this video. However, all over the internet right now, there are screenshots of things like this that are getting shared. So as we see right here in full HD, Tosh says, "Non-binary, I just said, and I'm going to use they instead of she from now on," confirming that yes, this character is absolutely 100% non-binary, and the claims by that playtester were once again, like the sanding of any rough edges, also very right and true. This makes me then believe that everything else the playtester said must be true as well. They also claim that Solus only shows up in the beginning and the ending of the game for the most part. I don't know that yet, but that does seem to be the case, and that the game is littered with what is called woke current day-isms all over from start to finish. I mean, the fact that during certain dialogue choices as shown on screen here, there's even gender-specific dialogue options given to the player. Again, these screenshots have been shared all over the internet as of yesterday, so good luck to BioWare trying to, DMCA literally thousands of people for this. There's also another part which I saw Paul Tassi tweet that there's going to be a specific side quest that will make people really mad. And I can only assume that this is what he is referring to. Again, here's another screenshot taken out of the game. I don't know specifically where this quest lands in the game as of yet. But we see the game says in its conversation wheel, establishes transgender identity and unlocks new dialogue options in future conversations. So transgenderism as a concept is 100% introduced within Veilguard, and now there is no point in denying it. They say that it doesn't affect gameplay, but it affects the conversations of the game, and since the conversations are interactive, that means that they actually do in fact affect gameplay a lot. I would go as far as to say it fundamentally changes how the game's characters see another character if suddenly everyone needs to adhere to these new pronoun options. What's also weird is on the right side here, it shows there's conversation options to say these scars are sexy, and my scars are badges of honor. I don't know if they're referring to just scars in general, like from battle, or if they're specifically pointing out the top surgery scars that you can implement into your character during the character creator. But since these two dialogue options are clearly during the same scene with the same background and everything else, I can only wager that this combination of speaking about transgenderism and scars is probably definitely about those same top surgery scars. But the game very, very clearly has a deliberate push to ensure that all the current day-isms are in this game. And that's one of the biggest problems for me, which is that I don't like it when games that are very clearly based within fictional fantasy worlds, completely removed from our own in terms of, races and whatnot, are now adhering to 2024 modern day topics. As you know, when you watch or play something and characters are speaking like 2024 Redditors when they clearly don't exist during that time, A really good example of this was actually Castlevania Nocturne on Netflix. I didn't really like that show. I found it pretty awful, and I will not be watching any future seasons of it because why do we have people during the French Revolution speaking like Starbucks baristas? The same problem stems into Veilguard and many other games too, like Concord as well. All of these games are not really interested in giving you true escapism. Instead, you're being forced to gorge on slop in order to experience these worlds firsthand. It sort of just defeats the entire purpose of a fantasy world if you're not willing to allow people to experience that world for its fantasy reasons. I don't play Dragon Age games to be reminded of the current political climate of the world or the fact that I have to pay taxes or anything like that. I don't want to see Kamala Harris or Donald Trump or whoever else in Dragon Age or Mass Effect or anything else. Keep this stuff out of games. I, like many of you, probably play these games for the same reason, which is for escapism. I don't need Geralt of Rivia to look directly into the camera after eating an apple pie and say, "Bro, this pie is bussing, no cap." It would make contextually zero amounts of sense for someone from that world to speak like a zoomer. Yet in Veilguard, that's exactly what's happening here. These characters not only speak like modern day Joss Whedon, did that just happen like people dialogue-wise? But they just don't feel very authentic in terms of being fantasy characters. Instead, what Veilguard's characters do seem like are more like people that are LARPing or cosplaying as fantasy characters at like a Comic-Con convention or something. Half the time, you're just waiting for these companions to pull their cell phones out and start doing a little dance for a TikTok for their followers. Because that's the kind of vibe that this game is giving off to you. How we went from the dark realism and gritty world of Origins to this Fisher-Price Rugrats baby's first action game that is Veilguard, it needs to be studied so that we never replicate it ever again. And just like Concord did at launch with their tags on Steam, Veilguard as well publicly states that one of its key tags for discovering the game is indeed LGBTQ+ stuff, as if you needed any more reason as to what this game's politics and directions were from the very start. It's not surprising, sadly. I mean, the director is a trans person, and this director worked previously on The Sims at EA as well, which also had top surgery scars as an option, so it makes sense why, when they started working on Veilguard for EA as well, that they would just simply translate what they did for Sims over to here on Veilguard. But in my opinion, it doesn't work because Sims at the very least is meant to exist in modern day, and Veilguard, like I said, is obviously a fantasy world. They're completely different and should not adhere to modern day concepts or terminologies. The point of fantasy worlds is that they have their own world and their own terminologies too. For example, if I were to say Tal Vashoth in real life, that would get people looking at me like I just escaped a mental asylum. But in Dragon Age world, you would say that and then they would go, "Oh, this person is a Kunari," or someone who rejected the teachings of the Kun and became banished. Same with stuff like Darkspawn or Archdemon or Necromancer. These are not real things in our world, or I hope not anyway. But there's a reason why these terms are important within these worlds, because they're fantasy worlds for a reason. We need to separate the annoying isms of the real world from our fictional ones, otherwise, what's the point of playing these games if we can't escape objective reality? Like I said, Veilguard is being made for a very specific kind of player. Take this moment in IGN's review for a good example of this.
Not to spoil specifically who I'm talking about here, as a non-binary person myself, Veilguard includes some of the most authentic representation of coming to terms with general gender stuff, and having to navigate your family's reaction to it I've yet to see in a game. It doesn't feel like an after-school special or like I'm being pandered to. It's quite well handled, and finding out that the writer for this character is non-binary themselves did not surprise me at all.
A damn good-looking hero, if I do say so.
This person they're talking about, by the way, is Tosh in this part of IGN's review. And finding out that the person who wrote Tosh is non-binary themselves is, well, that's not surprising at all, is it? Yet another writer that is self-inserting themselves into a game by writing that character from their own perspective to a T. Tosh is the Dragon Age equivalent to that one writer lady whose name I just forget, but she wrote the I Am Not Starfire graphic novel, and then everybody criticized that book because Starfire, who's a bombshell, has a daughter who is a fat, frumpy short girl with a very specific haircut that looks identical to the person who wrote the book and made that character in the first place. The point that I'm making here is that a lot of these modern writers are completely incapable of creating something that isn't just them on the page 100% all of the time. So it's not at all surprising that Tosh is basically a self-insert for some writer at BioWare. In fact, I would be actually surprised if they weren't written by a non-binary person, because this current day trope always manages to be proven right time and again, regardless of the game or movie or show that we're talking about. To add more insult to injury, one Twitter user named Natalia was able to secure herself a Veilguard review code prior to release. How did she do it, you may be asking? It's simple. She reached out to the South American side of EA and BioWare and then told them that she was non-binary when she isn't. And then immediately she was sent a code and actually began playing the game. I wish I was kidding, but that's actually what happened. I even talked to Natalia and I asked her if she could show me proof of the game being played, and she did show me in DMs. She even showed how she got various achievements for the game via her version that she was playing, which she was playing on Xbox, by the way. Natalia played Veilguard for 3.5 hours, and this is what she said via Twitter based on what she played. She said the game has an awful graphical style and has terrible graphics in general, combat is very boring, and it just feels like a poor man's God of War 2018. The game can't hold a stable 30 FPS on Xbox at least either. There's lots of screen freezes when many NPCs are on screen as well. A lot of the dialogue, in her opinion, feel like they were written by AI instead of real human beings due to how they're framed and said. The game is very linear with false senses of freedom. The character creator is very pandering, which, yeah, we know that already. There's a lot of inclusive language that is littered all throughout. They are playing in Spanish, obviously, and they say stuff like Latinx and such nonsense is being used. The characters are very robotic and lack good facial animation. Skillup also confirmed that as well in his review too. The script nor the quest make much sense. The side content feels pointless and just feels like filler, like go kill these bugs, etc. There's lots of diversity and lots of focus on gay relationships and more. Overall, Natalia said based on what she played, the game is awful. She hated her time with it and tells people to not even buy the game if it's on sale. She then uninstalled it after posting these impressions and then started swearing a lot, which I won't repeat because this is YouTube, but yeah, there you go. There's a review from someone who, I'll remind you again, got a review code for just lying and saying that they're non-binary to a representative. So would she have gotten a code if she said that she was a woman? Probably not, but the fact they gave her one when she said she was one of the isms is hilarious to me. Also, again, showing that this game is being favorably reviewed based on ideology, so let's keep going. At Checkpoint Gaming, they gave Veilguard a 10 out of 10. Okay, fair enough. However, looking at the reasons why, as Twitter user Manga Lawyer pointed out here, the game has in its pros that the game is very inclusive, which is corporate speak for this game panders like crazy to the things we care about in a social sense, like gender and so on. They also say the game will be a testament to diversity as seen here as well, again further confirming that yet again another review was given favorably due to the fact that the game panders to what these reviewers care about, but clearly are not things that players care about at all. I mean, let's just read this part of the review which says, a special shout out needs to happen here, as Dragon Age has once again done an excellent job when it comes to inclusivity and diversity, sexuality, and gender. Again, I won't go into too many details as some of this stuff is truly stellar and better left unsaid. But as a simple example, playing as a male identifying protagonist, I was able to flirt with whomever I wanted. It didn't always go to plan, but I had options across the board if I wanted to be gay AF, like in real life. Wow. I'm looking forward to experimenting more in future playthroughs, but in a real testament to the storytelling, I came to value my platonic relationships here just as much. So there you go, as plain as day for all to see. Now you look at this 10 out of 10, and now you tell me if the game would have reviewed as favorably by this person if it didn't pander to what this reviewer specifically wanted out of the game in a social cause-like way. This then just makes me not trust any of these reviews, full stop in my opinion. They are being so open about pandering as industry shills that they are no longer caring what that means for their credibility as games journalists, and this is one of the problems with the games industry overall. There's no sense of cohesion. They hate games, or they give them lower scores like Space Marine 2, which was not pandering, but they praise the games that do that instead. And it's not only unfair, but it's disingenuous, and Skillup even says during his review of the game that the way these companions especially are written, they feel like they were HR mandated. What he means by this is that every character's dialogue feels like it was written with some HR manager standing above the writer, ensuring that everything felt corporate mandated and not offensive or demeaning in any way, like a company sending out a Happy Holidays email instead of Happy Christmas, if you will. Nothing can be problematic because they don't want to offend anyone, and Rook, the main character that you play, oftentimes speaks to his companions like children, trying to get them to be all kumbaya and happy-go-lucky with each other. The best way to explain the relationship between Rook and the companions of Veilguard is that you are playing a youth guidance counselor, and your companions are literal children that are sent by their parents to go to band camp for the summer. These do not feel like real people that actually exist. They are caricatures of life, forced to dance for an industry that is largely disconnected from the players that they should be catering to. None of the nuance or grit is there. I loved games like Mass Effect or Origins because you had team members that were genuinely not good people and did questionable things. Morrigan is a daughter of Flemeth, a crazy witch who literally raises young witches up so that she can one day commandeer their youthful bodies in order to keep herself alive. This story bit of Morrigan's backstory was wild and objectively problematic to some maybe because it's someone literally taking agency of your body over you and using you, but this is interesting of course because then it opens up the conversation over how parents control their children and shape them into who they should be instead of who they want to be, and brings up the question of, without Flemeth's protection and guidance, would Morrigan even be alive today to begin with? And that's an interesting dilemma to dissect and pick apart, but that's why it's interesting to see. And you don't have that in Veilguard. I mean, even going back to Inquisition, you have characters like Cole, who is a lot like what I just explained. For those unaware, Cole is not the person that you see in front of you in that game. The body of Cole is a dead young man who was betrayed and taken advantage of by very evil people. But the Cole that you know and talk to is actually a spirit from the Fade. You know, the dimension of magic and dreams, if you don't know that inhabited Cole's body and effectively uses him as a vessel to experience the world around him. Cole's story touches on child abandonment, abuse, and torture, but again, what a cool idea for a character to explore within the confines of a video game, right? The problem here is that BioWare is unwilling to skirt towards the abyss even just a bit because they're afraid of getting cancelled. Old BioWare would be laughing at Veilguard if they knew what was to come from this series, not just from a visual standpoint, but thematically in its characters. These are but Dragon Age characters in name alone. You know what a lot of this reminds me of? It reminds me of Suicide Squad and Rocksteady. I made a video way back earlier this year on Rocksteady and the whole debacle surrounding that game. How the studio that made objectively 3 of the greatest superhero games ever made in the form of the Batman Arkham series went from that to Kill the Justice League. But as I proved in those videos, a lot of the people who made those Batman games were no longer at Rocksteady anymore. And the theory that I used to explain this was the ship of Theseus, and it applies here as well. The gist of it is the ship of Theseus still the same ship if every piece of the previous ship was replaced over time with new pieces? Until eventually the entire ship as you once knew, it was no longer made of any of the original parts of wood, of metal, of cloth that it was when it first existed. While it may still bear the same name, could you still realistically call it the same ship? The answer that I came to that is still relevant now, which is that the ship being either made of its previous pieces or not, doesn't actually matter. And in fact, what actually made the ship of Theseus important wasn't its sail or its rudder or the wood that made its body. It was the people that inhabited the ship that made it what it was. A ship is nothing but a vessel. Regardless of who sits inside of it, the ship remains the same. But it's like a race car. It can achieve amazing things based on who is behind the steering wheel and their experiences. While Rocksteady is still named Rocksteady and objectively the same studio as in the walls and all of that the devs there inhabit, are probably the same ones that the devs before that made the Batman Arkham games were there as well over Squad like BioWare and the ship and all this other nonsense. Ultimately, what really matters is that the people at BioWare are not the same BioWare that made you the original Mass Effect games for the most part, or even Dragon Age. Most of these people have moved on, founded new studios, or made other games. Mike Laidlaw, who was in charge of Dragon Age for years, he already has his own new game coming out called Eternal Strands. Then you have the director of Mass Effect, Casey Hudson, who founded his own studio called Humanoid Origin. And of course, other former BioWare devs and even the writer of Mass Effect, Drew Karpyshyn, they left a long time ago too. And they also founded a new studio and they're making a game called Exodus, which you may have seen or heard of. The point is that the BioWare you knew, the BioWare that I loved, is not the BioWare that remains. Like the ship of Theseus, it may still be objectively BioWare as in the same studio, but the people within, for the most part, are long gone. Gone are the forward thinkers who gave you the worlds of Mass Effect and Dragon Age, and what remains is a team very clearly more interested in pushing ideology and gender stuff instead of giving you the dark and gritty universe that it was originally. There has never been a more objective example of the ship of Theseus than BioWare right now. Looking at Origins and comparing it to Veilguard is two completely different games. There is no argument to be had here. These are not the same teams anymore with these similar visions. The usual suspects will glorify and slather their lips all over BioWare because of the inclusiveness, the ideology, and the pandering. But for the people who actually have to buy these games, the fans who were there when the Grey Wardens called for reinforcements but were rejected by Loghain, when Hawk stopped the Kunari Rebellion, and when we actually cared about these characters, I fear these times are long past us. BioWare had 10 years to make a game worthy of the Dragon Age name and give fans what they wanted, but the best they could do is a game devoid of unique gameplay elements, stiff linear exploration, laughably bad facial animation still, even after Andromeda, and a Fisher-Price baby's first look at the world and its characters, and a game that is simply Dragon Age in no other way than the name alone. Ultimately, it looks to be a game that, for all of the talks and praise of pushing identity politics, they have seemed to have forgotten about its own unique identity in the Crusade, to pander to people who won't even buy your game enough to keep you afloat until the next one comes out. I genuinely do fear that this is the end of BioWare, the death of Dragon Age, and I am not happy about it at all. I love this series, but seeing where they've gone with this, it fills me with nothing but disappointment and contempt. I can only hope that one day EA sells off these IP to more capable studios actually willing to give us stories and characters worthy of a world as amazing as this. But it seems for many that the story of Dragon Age ended with Inquisition, and everything past this point is nothing but fan fiction that maybe doesn't need to exist. Like Suicide Squad, Concord, and many others before it. I'm mad, I'm sad about this. I waited so long, and this is what they gave us. Well, you let me know what you guys think. I'm sure as we get closer to release, more will happen, but thank you for watching. Subscribe, thanks to my members and patrons, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.